It was a lazy Sunday morning, the kind that smelled like fresh coffee and sounded like peace. Birds chirped in the maple trees lining the street. The neighbors' sprinklers hissed gently, and my dog Cooper dozed at my feet while I thumbed through the newspaper. Life was as calm as a painting, until it shattered. A silver SUV tore into my driveway like a bat out of hell, tires screeching loud enough to make Cooper leap up and bark furiously. Before I could stand, the car door slammed open and out stormed a woman in giant sunglasses and a neon pink tracksuit that screamed midlife crisis. She clutched a thick stack of papers, her arms flailing like she was waving off a swarm of invisible bees. She marched straight toward me, heels clacking on my concrete like gunfire, and before I could get a single word out, she jabbed the papers into my chest and shouted, "You need to vacate immediately." I bought this house fair and square. Cooper growled low and steady, reading the absurdity better than I could at that moment. I blinked at her, completely floored. Vacate? Bought my house? Was this some kind of prank? Had I stumbled into a hidden camera show? The woman, who I later learned everyone called Karen long before I had the pleasure, crossed her arms with the confidence of a medieval king claiming new land by merely pointing at it. Trying to suppress a chuckle, I gently pushed the crumpled paper she thrust at me back into her hand. "I think you're mistaken," I said, glancing around, realizing that several of my neighbors were peeking out from their windows, some even stepping onto their porches. Karen's voice escalated, shrill and imperious, slicing through the morning air. "Don't play games with me. The deal is done. I sent the money. I have the paperwork. And you are trespassing on my property." Cooper barked again, as if to second the motion that this woman was absolutely off her rocker. Karen recoiled as if he had leaped for her throat, pointing a manicured finger at him. "Control your beast. He's aggressive and dangerous," she screeched. More neighbors appeared now, some openly filming. One teenager across the street whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Dude, this is better than Netflix." Karen strutted toward the front door as if she owned the place, but I stepped into her path, arms crossed. "How exactly did you buy this house?" I asked calmly, resisting every urge to laugh in her face. She thrust the papers at me again, waving them dramatically like they were sacred scrolls. "It was a private sale. I wired the money to the seller just yesterday. It's legally mine now," she snapped. I took a quick glance at the papers. They were a printed email thread with broken English, promises of a once-in-a-lifetime deal, and a few fake-looking invoices stamped with a suspiciously smudged logo called Royal Estate Professionals. I could feel the smile twitching at the corners of my mouth. "Karen," I said, "you got scammed." That only made her angrier. "Scammed? Are you kidding me? You're just mad you lost your house." She barked back. The circus was now fully underway. One of my neighbors rolled a lawn chair out to the sidewalk and popped a can of soda, settling in like he was at a front row seat for a prize fight. Karen whipped out her phone and, to my complete amazement, called 911. "Yes, I'm at my property, and there's a dangerous man refusing to leave," she said, throwing glances around as if searching for backup. Now thoroughly amused, I pulled out my own phone and called 911 as well. "Hi, yeah, I own the house at this address, and there's a woman here claiming she bought it in a secret sale," I explained to the dispatcher, barely containing my laughter. Within minutes, the familiar blue and white of the local police cruisers pulled up, sirens off but lights flickering. Out stepped Officer Mitchell, a man I'd shared beers with at more than one neighborhood block party. His eyes flickered from me to Karen, then to the crowd that had now ballooned to a dozen strong. Karen, seeing the officers, instantly switched tactics. She started crying, big, fake, shoulder-shaking sobs that would make a soap opera actress cringe. "He's trying to steal my home," she wailed, holding the papers up like the very weight of them was too much for her to bear. Officer Mitchell gave me a glance that clearly said, "Is this woman for real?" I shrugged and handed him my actual deed, complete with the county seal and notarization. Mitchell flipped through it, nodding slowly, while Karen continued to sob into a tissue she produced seemingly out of thin air. "This deed clearly shows James owns the property," Mitchell said to Karen. Do you have a certified deed or just these emails? Karen gasped, her eyes darting around wildly like she just realized the audience she had. These are good enough. The deal was real. My cousin's a lawyer. He said it was a good investment. Mitchell raised an eyebrow. And where is your cousin? Karen stammered, he's, on vacation. In Tahiti, or maybe Fiji. Somewhere important. From the back of the crowd, someone loudly whispered, translation, imaginary, prompting laughter to ripple through the onlookers. Karen turned beet red, her fury boiling just under the surface. Mitchell tried to be polite but firm. Man, you've been the victim of a scam. This man owns the house. If you refuse to leave, you could be charged with trespassing. That's when Karen snapped. She pointed at me and screeched, you'll regret this. I'll get my lawyer. You're going to pay for stealing my home. She spun on her heel and stomped back to her SUV, her tires once again screaming as she reversed out of the driveway, narrowly missing my mailbox. I shook my head. Cooper let out a gruff puff, and the crowd slowly started to disperse, chattering excitedly. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the last I'd seen of her. As I watched Karen's SUV disappear around the corner, a strange feeling twisted in my gut. Something told me that for Karen, this was just round one, and round two was coming faster and crazier than anyone could have predicted. The next morning I woke up to the sound of a car door slamming so hard it rattled my windows. Peeking through the blinds, I caught sight of the silver SUV back in my driveway. Only this time, Karen wasn't alone. She had brought reinforcements. 2 men in matching polo shirts and khakis stood beside her, looking equally confused and equally determined. Each one clutched a clipboard like it was a weapon. Cooper was already barking, his paws scratching anxiously at the door. I slipped on a hoodie and made my way outside, feeling the simmer of annoyance bubble just under my skin. As soon as I stepped onto the porch, Karen pointed at me and shouted like a town crier announcing a scandal. There he is, the squatter. Get him off my property. The 2 clipboard men approached me, faces serious, their matching uniforms reading something like Craig's Rapid Evictions in tiny print under a cartoon dabble logo. One of them cleared his throat and said with an air of officiousness, Sir, we've been hired to serve you an immediate eviction notice. Please vacate the premises within 30 minutes or further action will be taken. I stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. You're kidding, right? I said, barely resisting the urge to laugh. Karen folded her arms and gave me a smug, victorious grin like she had just outmaneuvered me in a chess match she barely understood. The clipboard guys seemed genuinely uncomfortable as I asked for identification, credentials, or any sort of legal documentation. They shifted awkwardly, glancing at Karen, who hissed under her breath for them to stay strong. All right, let's see the eviction order, I said, extending my hand. One of them handed me a single sheet of paper, printed with crooked margins and riddled with spelling errors. The words, "A physical eviction notice," screamed across the top in bold Comic Sans font. I blinked slowly, trying to process whether this was a poorly executed prank or Karen's genuine plan of attack. You know this isn't a real eviction notice, right? I said, waving the paper in front of them. It has a cartoon hammer and misspelled legal terms. Karen huffed. It's binding. My cousin wrote it up. He's a legal expert. I was about to respond when Officer Mitchell pulled into the driveway again, his face already twisted into an expression of exhausted disbelief. He parked and strolled up the lawn slowly, like a man visiting a scene of recurring nightmares. Morning, James, he said, tipping his cap. Morning, Karen. I see you've upped the ante today. Karen stood tall, chest out, like she was waiting for applause. Officer, I am formally evicting this man from my property. I have official paperwork. Mitchell took the paper from my hand, read it for about 2 seconds, then slowly turned to Karen. Ma'am, this is not an official document. It's not even a halfway decent forgery. This isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Karen gasped in horror. Are you saying my cousin lied to me? Mitchell pressed his lips together to stop a laugh. I'm saying whoever gave you this is either scamming you or watching way too many courtroom dramas. Cooper barked again, his tail wagging like this entire circus was the best entertainment he had ever witnessed. The two clipboard men muttered something about not getting involved in legal stuff and practically jogged back to their car, leaving Karen standing there alone and fuming. She whipped out her phone and started typing furiously, muttering about lawsuits and wrongful evictions and how she would own this entire block soon enough. Mitchell, sensing that things could escalate further, suggested we all sit tight while he called a supervisor. Karen immediately objected, claiming supervisors were unnecessary when the facts were obvious, and that she knew her rights better than any law enforcement officer. Nevertheless, within 20 minutes, a second patrol car pulled up, and out stepped Sergeant Torres, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she had seen every flavor of crazy the world had to offer. She took one look at the scene, scanned the absurd paper Karen had tried to pass off as an eviction notice, and sighed heavily. "Ma'am, you have no legal standing. If you don't leave voluntarily, we will have to remove you from the property for trespassing," she said in a tone that brooked no argument. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She stuttered, trying to find words, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped her handbag like a lifeline. "You'll all be sorry," she screamed, her voice cracking. "This isn't over. I have powerful friends." She spun dramatically on her heel again and stormed back to her SUV, peeling out of my driveway so fast that she kicked up a cloud of dust, forcing several neighbors to shield their faces. I watched her vanish down the street and turned to Sergeant Torres. "You think that's the last of it?" I asked, half joking, half hoping. Torres chuckled grimly. "Not a chance. She's the type who digs her hole deeper every time she opens her mouth." After the officers left, the neighbors slowly wandered back to their homes, though a few lingered to swap theories about what Karen would try next. Mr. Collins from 2 doors down thought she might show up with a fake moving company. Mrs. Edwards suggested we all chip in and hire a mariachi band to follow her around if she returned. I laughed at their suggestions, but deep down, an annoying worry took hold. Karen clearly wasn't acting rationally. She wasn't just a nuisance. She was dangerously deluded. That evening, I decided to tighten up security. I installed new cameras around the property, added extra locks to the doors, and even put up a "Smile, you're on camera" sign out front. It wasn't just about keeping Karen out. It was about making sure if she did come back, there would be no ambiguity about who was causing trouble. Cooper seemed to pick up on the tension. He followed me from room to room, never more than a few feet away, his dark eyes watching every shadow. As I finished securing the last lock on the back door, I stood in the quiet kitchen, staring out into the darkened backyard. Somewhere out there, I knew Karen was plotting her next move, and if today was any indication, it was going to be even more ridiculous than the last. I didn't know exactly what she would try. Maybe she'd show up with a homemade sheriff's badge. Maybe she'd arrive with a camera crew claiming to film a documentary about her historic home acquisition. Maybe she tried to move in with a sleeping bag and a bag of Cheetos. Whatever it was, I knew it was coming and soon. I only hoped that when the next battle began, my patience would last longer than her nonsense. But judging by the glint in Cooper's eye and the sheer absurdity of the day's events, I had a feeling this war was just getting started. 3 days of silence had lulled me into a fragile sense of peace. I started to think maybe, just maybe, Karen had finally accepted reality and slunk back to whatever HOA committee spawned her. Cooper seemed more relaxed too, spending afternoons sunbathing on the porch instead of patrolling every window like a furry security guard. But the uneasy truce shattered one afternoon when I received an unexpected call from the title company that originally handled my home purchase. The receptionist's voice was tight, polite, but tinged with something that instantly set my nerves on edge. She explained that a woman named Karen had been harassing their office for 2 days straight, demanding that they release her deed and correct the clerical error that listed me as the homeowner. When they refused, she threatened legal action, media exposure, and in one unhinged rant, promised to bring in federal agents to seize the property. I thanked the receptionist and hung up, heart sinking. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And sure enough, not even an hour later, Karen's SUV came crawling into my driveway like a cockroach that refused to die. But this time she was dressed for war. She had traded her neon tracksuit for a full-blown pantsuit, complete with a knockoff leather briefcase clutched tight under her arm. Cooper immediately bristled, hackles rising as he growled low. I opened the door before she could knock, determined not to give her the satisfaction. Karen flashed a sickly sweet smile, her lipstick smeared slightly at the corners of her mouth. "Good afternoon," she said in a syrupy tone that barely masked the venom underneath. "I'm here to offer you one last chance to vacate peacefully before I take this to court." I leaned casually against the doorframe. "You've already called the cops. You've already tried to evict me with fake documents. You've already harassed the title company. What's left? Skywriting?" Her smile twitched but didn't falter. "You'll see soon enough," she hissed before marching back to her SUV. I didn't have to wait long. That night, a letter was taped to my door, written in dramatic all-caps font, declaring that I was being sued for squatters' rights theft, emotional distress, and willful possession of stolen property. Attached was a court summons she had printed herself from a website that also offered free wizard certifications if you filled out 3 surveys. I shook my head in disbelief and chuckled to myself. She truly believed she was building an airtight case against me, like some deranged crusader on a mission to reclaim the Holy Grail. The next morning, I decided to cut this nonsense off at the knees. I scheduled a formal meeting at the title company's downtown office and invited both Karen and Officer Mitchell to attend. I wanted everything official and witnessed. No more driveway-side dramas or he-said-she-said arguments. Predictably, Karen showed up wearing a dramatic black coat with oversized sunglasses, acting like she was about to unveil some scandal that would rock the real estate world to its core. She carried a fat binder filled with papers, which she slammed onto the conference table like it contained state secrets. Across from her, I sat calmly, my hands folded neatly in front of me, while Officer Mitchell took a seat beside me, his notepad ready. The title company's legal counsel, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Barton, entered the room with an air of professional patience and immediately set the tone. Karen launched into a tirade, explaining how she had discovered a rare opportunity through an exclusive real estate connection on Facebook, where she had found my house listed for half its market value. She described wiring nearly $70,000 to secure the sale, following expert legal advice from her cousin, who she now admitted might not have been technically certified, but knew more than most lawyers anyway. Ms. Barton listened without interrupting, flipping through Karen's binder with clinical disinterest. Finally, after Karen finished her breathless speech, Ms. Barton slid a single sheet across the table. It was the actual certified title deed for my house, complete with a date 5 years prior, a full legal description of the property, and my notarized signature. This document proves Mr. Alexander has owned the property continuously since the date of this deed, Ms. Barton said coolly. No subsequent transaction has been recorded with the county or authorized by him. Karen's face twisted, the color draining from her cheeks. "Then explain this," she screeched, pulling out a series of printed screenshots from her binder. They showed grainy images of my house, but the captions were so absurd it was hard not to laugh. One read, "Haunted mansion for sale. Half price. Act fast." Another read, "Private seller. No need for paperwork. Trust-based transaction only." Ms. Barton barely concealed a smirk. "Ma'am, you were scammed. These are obvious fraud listings. No legitimate title transfer can occur without notarized documents filed through official channels. What you participated in was an online fraud scheme." Karen's mouth worked soundlessly, her brain visibly struggling to process the information. Officer Mitchell took the opportunity to gently suggest she consider filing a police report against the scammer. However, he added with a pointed look, "Filing a false report against Mr. Alexander would not end well for you." Karen exploded. She accused the title company of being part of a widespread conspiracy, claimed Officer Mitchell was biased against women, and accused me of sorcery at one point, as if my ownership of my own house was some dark magic trick she had fallen prey to. After another 10 minutes of shouting and finger-pointing, Ms. Barton stood and calmly declared the meeting over. She informed Karen that any further harassment would result in criminal charges. As Karen gathered her ridiculous binder, muttering about lawsuits and secret cables, Officer Mitchell leaned toward me and whispered, "You should probably lawyer up anyway, just in case." I nodded grimly. As much as today had gone in my favor, I knew Karen wasn't wired to accept defeat gracefully. On the way out, she turned back one last time, glaring at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. "Enjoy your stolen house while you can," she spat. "This isn't over." And deep down, I knew she was right. For people like Karen, reality wasn't a brick wall. It was a paper door they could punch through again and again until something, anything, gave them the validation they craved. She wasn't just beaten, she was humiliated, and humiliation for someone like her was fuel. As I drove home, Cooper sticking his head happily out the window, I braced myself for what was coming next. Karen wasn't retreating, she was regrouping, and the next move she made would be even crazier than anything she had tried so far. I just didn't know yet how far she was willing to go to live in a house that never belonged to her. It took less than a week for Karen's next move to hit me like a brick to the face. I had just come home from grabbing groceries when I saw a thick envelope sticking out of my mailbox, addressed to me in large, aggressive handwriting that looked like it had been scrawled in a fit of rage. I pulled it out cautiously, half expecting glitter bombs or worse, but what I found inside was somehow more ridiculous. Karen had filed a lawsuit, a real, legitimate court case, stamped and processed by the county clerk. She was suing me for illegal occupancy, emotional distress, financial damages, and astonishingly, the theft of her dream life. The lawsuit demanded $2 million in damages and the immediate forfeit of my property to her. I stood there, groceries forgotten in the trunk, rereading the papers until the words blurred together. Cooper barked once, as if to say, "Here we go again." I took a deep breath and went inside, calling my lawyer before I even set the milk down. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I wanted. The courthouse buzzed with the usual background noise of murmured conversations and footsteps echoing against marble floors. I sat at the defendant's table next to my lawyer, Mr. Harlow, a calm, meticulous man who looked more like a retired librarian than a courtroom shark. Across from us, Karen sat proudly at the plaintiff's table, alone, representing herself. She wore an oversized blazer that swallowed her frame and a pair of sunglasses perched dramatically on top of her head, like she was waiting for paparazzi to jump out at any moment. She had a mountain of papers, folders, and what looked suspiciously like screenshots of Facebook posts stacked haphazardly around her. When the judge entered, everyone rose. He was an older man, stern but fair-looking, the kind of judge who had probably seen every kind of nonsense imaginable. As we sat down, he wasted no time. "Ms. Karen," he said, adjusting his glasses as he peered over the paperwork, "you are representing yourself today." Karen stood up, chest puffed out. "Yes, Your Honor. I couldn't find a lawyer brave enough to stand up to the corruption in this case." A low ripple of amusement went through the courtroom, quickly hushed by a glare from the bailiff. The judge nodded patiently. "Very well. Please proceed with your opening statement." Karen launched into a rambling speech about injustice, betrayal, emotional agony, and theft of destiny. She painted herself as a victim of a grand conspiracy involving me, the title company, the police department, and even suggested the judge himself might be involved if he ruled against her. She waved her arms wildly, flipping through pages at random, quoting random phrases from real estate blogs and YouTube conspiracy videos as if they were legal precedent. My lawyer and I sat silently, letting her dig her own grave deeper with every word. When it was finally our turn, Mr. Harlow stood up calmly, presenting the real deed, the title records, and official documentation proving my ownership beyond any shadow of a doubt. The judge flipped through the evidence, his face giving nothing away. Then he turned to Karen. "Miss Karen, can you produce any legally recognized documents showing you own this property?" Karen scrambled through her papers, knocking a manila folder onto the floor. She retrieved a crumpled email printout, complete with broken English promises of ownership. a fake title transfer form from a website that also offered astrology readings, and a screenshot of a PayPal transaction labeled house payment. She presented them to the judge like they were smoking guns. The judge sifted through them slowly, sighed heavily, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Miss Karen," he said, his voice tired, "this is not how real estate transactions work." Karen's face fell, but she quickly tried to recover. "I was assured this was a legitimate deal. I demand justice." The judge was mercifully patient, but his tone turned firmer. "You were scammed. I sympathize with that. However, that does not entitle you to seize property owned by someone else, nor does it give you the right to harass, threaten, or sue an innocent party." Karen sputtered, her hands clenching into fists on the table. The judge turned to Mr. Harlow. "Motion to dismiss." "Motion to dismiss, Your Honor," my lawyer said smoothly. The judge slammed the gavel down with a single sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. "Case dismissed with prejudice. Defendant is awarded legal costs. Plaintiff is warned against filing any further frivolous lawsuits." The courtroom buzzed again, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she was about to burst into flames. She gathered her papers with trembling hands, muttering under her breath about corruption, injustice, and how she would take this to the Supreme Court if she had to. As she stormed out of the courtroom, she tripped on the hem of her oversized blazer, catching herself against the doorframe with a loud thunk that drew a few sympathetic but mostly amused looks. Later that week, my lawyer filed a countersuit against Karen for harassment, defamation, and emotional distress. It was a necessary move, not out of spite, but to ensure there was a real consequence for her endless nonsense. Surprisingly, she didn't fight it, probably because by then her resources were stretched to the breaking point. Word spread fast around the neighborhood about the court case. Neighbors stopped me on the street to congratulate me. One of them even made a joke about putting up a Karen scarecrow for Halloween, complete with a fake deed and a cell phone taped to its hand. Karen herself largely disappeared from the neighborhood. I heard rumors she had to sell her actual house, the one she legitimately owned, to cover her mounting legal debt. I didn't celebrate her downfall, but I did feel relief. It felt like the end of a nightmare, yet part of me remained cautious. People like Karen rarely vanish completely. They lay low, regroup, and wait for another chance to turn the world upside down in the name of some imagined slight. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the cicadas buzzed in the trees, I sat on my porch with Cooper lying at my feet, watching the last light fade from the sky. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. The house was mine. The insanity had ended, and Karen, for the moment at least, was nothing more than a bad memory. But somewhere deep down, I knew if she ever did find another way to stir up trouble, I would be ready. This was my home, my life, and no matter how many fake deeds, fake lawsuits, or fake eviction notices she threw at me, I wasn't going anywhere. Cooper let out a soft bark, his nose twitching at the night air, and I smiled. Let Karen come. I had survived the worst she had to offer, and if she tried again, well, let's just say I had a few surprises of my own waiting. About a month after the courtroom debacle, life around the neighborhood finally began to return to normal. The sun seemed a little brighter, the air a little lighter, and even Cooper appeared more carefree, spending his afternoons chasing squirrels across the backyard without a hint of tension in his step. People smiled more, waved longer, and neighbors who hadn't spoken much before now stopped by to chat, always throwing in some comment about the legendary Karen incident. It was like surviving a minor war together had bonded the entire block. I almost believed that chapter of insanity was finally closed until the next neighborhood yard sale was announced. There was a buzz in the air about it, mainly because Karen had no choice but to participate. Word got out that between legal fees, fines, and the settlement she had to pay me, Karen had been forced to liquidate much of her stuff. It felt strange at first, almost wrong, to take any pleasure in someone's downfall. But then again, Karen had waged a one-woman war on reality and dragged the whole community through her personal circus. So when the day came, I couldn't help but be a little curious. The yard sale was held in the open field at the end of the street, tables set up under wide canopies, to shield the cellars from the summer sun. I wandered down with Cooper trotting beside me, not intending to buy anything, just to soak in the atmosphere. The moment I arrived, I could feel the energy shift. People pointed, whispered, and smirked as Karen sat sullenly behind a folding table covered with random junk priced at insultingly high rates. There were dusty candles, half-broken lamps, a blender missing its lid, and stacks of romance novels. The piece de resistance, however, was a framed certificate proclaiming Karen as Top Negotiator 2024 from an online seminar nobody had ever heard of. Someone, probably one of the teenagers, had secretly set a little handmade sign next to it that read Certified in Losing Property Deals. Neighbors casually strolled by her table, some buying things out of pity, others just to take a closer look at the walking disaster that had caused so much chaos. Karen sat stiffly, sunglasses perched on her nose even though she was under the shade, her mouth a tight, furious line, and she avoided eye contact with everyone. It was a spectacle, and a sad one at that. But the moment that truly sealed her public humiliation came an hour later, when Mrs. Williams, an 82-year-old firecracker of a woman, walked up to Karen's table, picked up a gaudy ceramic cat statue, and asked loudly enough for half the field to hear, "Does this come with a fake deed too? Or do I have to wire money to a Nigerian prince?" Laughter erupted around the field, people doubling over as Karen turned beet red. She muttered something about suing for harassment and packed up early, her SUV trunk rattling from the sheer weight of unsold junk as she screeched away one final time. The yard sale turned into an impromptu block party after that, with barbecue grills fired up and coolers cracked open. Someone had even rented a bounce house for the kids. I ended up spending most of the afternoon chatting with people I barely knew before, all of them eager to recount their favorite part of the Karen saga. Mr. Collins swore the highlight was Karen screaming about squatters' rights to a dog. Mrs. Edwards said it was the courtroom meltdown when Karen accused the judge of witchcraft. Everyone had a story, a memory, a joke, and somehow they all tied back to that one relentless woman. Later that evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange and pink, a few of us gathered around a fire pit in my backyard. The jokes and laughter continued until someone suggested we commemorate the event properly. At first, it was half a joke, but the idea took hold quickly. A week later, a small, tasteful sign was installed on the corner of our street. It simply read, "Welcome to Reality Lane. Population. Same people only." It wasn't mean-spirited. It was a reminder, a badge of survival. We had faced absurdity, stared it down, and come out stronger and closer as a community. Karen, meanwhile, had vanished. Rumors floated around that she had moved 2 towns over, trying to start fresh in a new neighborhood where her reputation hadn't preceded her. Some said she tried to join another HOA but was denied after a thorough background check. Others said she was laying low, licking her wounds. Part of me hoped she had learned something from all of it, though deep down I knew better. People like Karen rarely change. They just find new hills to die on. But for us, her departure marked a new beginning. Without her chaos, our neighborhood thrived. Yard sales became regular events, now infused with friendly competition and lots of inside jokes about haunted mansions and secret Facebook deals. I found myself more involved in the community too. I joined the neighborhood watch group, not out of fear, but out of camaraderie. Cooper became something of a mascot, with people bringing him treats and scratching behind his ears whenever we went on walks. Life had smoothed out into something peaceful, something beautiful, and it felt even sweeter knowing how hard it had been fought for. One quiet night, sitting once again on my porch with Cooper dozing at my feet, I thought about how strange it was that sometimes the worst experiences bring about the best outcomes. Karen had been a nightmare, no question, but she had also been the catalyst that turned a street full of strangers into a neighborhood full of friends. The stars twinkled overhead, the air cool and crisp, and for the first time in a long time, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for my home, for my neighbors, for Cooper, and even, in a strange way, for Karen. She had brought chaos, sure, but she had also brought us together in a way nothing else could have. I smiled into the dark, sipping my coffee slowly. If Karen ever showed her face around here again, she would find not just me standing firm, but an entire community ready to politely, firmly, and unequivocally show her the door. After all, once you've survived a storm like Karen, no little gust of crazy could ever knock you down.